Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm Alec McCutcheon from Unicom. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar. The theme of it is Making IT Change Work for You. And I'm delighted to welcome our presenter, Susan Windsor, from Gerard Consulting. So, Susan, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Alec. I hope you can hear me okay. Make sure the technology is working. I'd like to add my thanks to Alex, actually, and I really do appreciate you joining this webinar because it's a bit of a new area for us, to be perfectly honest. Now, what I plan to do today is consider some of the factors that are driving change within IT. And the impact that that has on us as individuals within our roles in different IT projects and perspectives. So I'm not looking at managing change from a strategic objective. It's more about how we recognize that we're part of a change program and how we benefit from that change as well. So that's the focus for today. Now, change has actually always been a factor in our lives. It's part of being human, actually. Change is constant. But it's the rate of change, I think, that is impacting us now. And I don't think it is just a question of change being more visible. I think that it is an increasing rate of change. So this focus, as I said, gives this webinar gives focus, as I said, to the impact on individuals. But what I want to do is explore some different IT challenges that drive change. And in particular, I really am interested in which topics are impacting you right now. So there's a little bit of participation later on, but I'll tell you more about that as we get a bit further through the webinar. So these are the different topics that I'm going to cover. Now, I don't have answers to all of these, but I think that these are the things that I'm observing that are impacting people in their jobs today. So I'm going to go through each of these and kind of outline what I think the challenges are and see whether or not you can recognize them as being relevant to you in your roles, really. And like I said, you will have an opportunity to have your say, so I'll get onto that a little bit later. Okay, first of all, I think the first thing that I'm identifying is that people really need to understand what their what the context is that they're operating within. Now, this is just an example change model, and if you research on the internet, there are hundreds of different models that you can look at. They all have some commonality in the language that they use, and I think this curve is fairly common to all of them. So, you know, first of all, when a change to our working practices or a change to our environment hits us, we kind of tend to go into denial, and then we get very defensive in our behavior, and then we start to experiment as to how this change might actually work for us, and eventually we tend to adapt to that change and actually commit to the change as well. So these are the kind of major sort of stages of change, if you like. And if we were dealing with one change at a time, that would be absolutely fine. We'd all recognize where we were on that curve and be able to deal with it. But it's not as simple as that anymore, is it? There are multiple waves of change happening. So in one dimension of your work, you might be at the start of this cycle, and in another dimension of your work, you might be at the end of the cycle. And we don't get a chance to kind of go through one change at a time because they hit us one after the other. And I don't know if any of you have ever read the little book, Who Moved My Cheese? But I found that quite illustrating. So I had a search on the internet for that. It's only a little, it's like a little comic really, but it's actually quite valuable and insightful, I think. And I'll leave you to go and find that and read it for yourself. I won't go through that now. So like I said, the first of these topics is understanding the context of what's happening in a change program. The second one is to do with requirements. Now, what I've called this is the shelf life or half-life of business requirements. And what I mean by that is, how long is it that, say, half of the requirements that you're working with remain valid for? our focus historically in IT has always been on getting the requirements right, and I would question whether we've ever really managed to do that. But we do tend to use requirements as the base for contracting, and we manage changes to those requirements rather by very strict change control measures, and that's been the way we've operated for a long time. And just a little bit on statistics, really. There's a lot of stats on the internet, but I quite liked this one because I think it demonstrates why we need to change our behaviour in this particular area quite well. If you look back to the 1980s, and I'm certainly old enough to remember working in the 1980s, requirements were stable, or at least half the requirements were stable for years. And that seems rather incredible these days, doesn't it? But it's true. We could base what we were working on the knowledge that at least half of the requirements we were building would remain static or remain valid. But by 2000 that had fallen to sort of 2 to 3 years, and by 2011 it had ran to about 6 months. Now I don't know about you, but I tend to think it's much shorter than 6 months now. I would think 3 months is probably more representative of the kind of mainstream applications that we're working on these days, and maybe even shorter than that. So we can't rely on believing that once we've got the requirements right, if that was ever the case, that they won't change. That's just not the case anymore. We have to assume that there's constant change, and that actually is changing our behaviour too. I think the other thing that's impacting us is the adoption of new working methods, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but there's quite a focus on different skill groups collaborating more together and actually even building multi-skilled teams. And this is very good news. I think we should all be kind of embracing this as a way of working. I think it's much more rewarding. But there is a transition phase that we all go through when we're picking up a new method of working. Everybody goes to work to do a good job, and we have our frame of reference, if you like, so that at the end of the day we know whether or not we've done a good job. We have some measure where we can say, yep, that was a really good day. And it's getting harder and harder to do that now when we're not quite sure whether or not we're actually meant to be generalists, or whether we're meant to have an awareness of the other skills, or whether we're meant to specialise more. And I think there's quite a lot of debate in the market about that. And it's all about what our identity is. You know, what hat are we wearing today? What kind of role are we playing today? And how do we measure at the end of the day whether it's been a good one or a not so good one? And when we use your frame of reference, it's easy to lose confidence, and it's easy to become less effective. So I think that's another sort of aspect to change that many of us are dealing with. Now, when talking about multi-skilled teams, you kind of think about development methodology as the first thing that springs to mind. And for a lot of time throughout sort of development approaches, we've used quite a structured, formal approach to delivery, and this diagram kind of represents that, but I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. But that's not the way life is now. It is for some programs, but not for all of them. What we're looking at now is quite an increased adoption of agile delivery in one form or another, and I think that many of us had felt that perhaps agile was the way forward, and it's kind of like the nirvana, and once we've cracked how to do agile, that will be it for a while. I actually think that's the case, I'm sorry to say. So if you're still struggling with adopting agile in your organization, I think we need to try and speed that up a little bit, because we're moving into an even more rapid environment than that, into continuous delivery. And what I mean by continuous delivery is not delivering working components of code or working functions every 2 to 4 weeks, but much more tighter timescales than that. Perhaps every week, perhaps every day, perhaps several times a day. So we have to have a kind of rigorous approach to how we're doing this. Now, we might not release code into production every sort of hour that's available for all of our users, we might have it turned off. But there's a huge emphasis on continuous delivery being the next way of developing software. Like I said, multiple waves of change. So if we're just about getting there with Agile, we're moving forward to continuous delivery now. A lot of organizations are. I mean, we've all heard about the cloud, haven't we? But what does that actually mean in terms of changing the way we're working? Now, this piece of research, which comes from Forrester, shows that the largest kind of growth area in terms of cloud services is provision of software as a service. And there are a lot of options out there now in terms of buying application software on almost like a rental basis. That's one way of looking at it. Now, this completely changes the way that we contract and the way that we make decisions about which software applications we're going to use. So as a customer, we might have been historically very keen to take commercial off-the-shelf packages and tailor them or configure them to meet our specific needs to give us competitive advantage. And that's the way our behavior has been kind of traditionally recognized, if you like, and all of our contracts and everything is set up like that. Now, from suppliers' point of view, suppliers of products have a commercial model that is based upon revenue and profits from the original sale of the application and then sufficient revenue to actually cover the cost of maintenance and new releases. Software as a service is completely different. If you're renting software on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, the supplier has a completely different commercial model that they have to work to. And this is a very major change, and a lot of organizations are really struggling with this, the kind of traditional product providers. How do they actually stay in business while they change their commercial model? That's the question they're facing. And from a customer point of view, how long is it before what looks like a cheap option of renting software services, how long does it take before that rental option actually turns out to be more expensive than buying the package in the first place? So it looks very attractive, but you really do have to kind of weigh up the pros and cons of this. It's a completely different way of thinking. It's not just a technical change. It's a commercial change, and it's a different way of thinking as well. And I don't particularly believe the figures here because they're to 2 decimal places, which is ridiculous. It's just they should have rounded them really. But the trend is definitely there, and we're kind of well on this trend now, and it's ever increasing. So if you're working for a software products company or you're buying software products, then this is something that you need to get your head around really, I think, and work out how you're going to really benefit from this change. Mobile is one of the hottest topics, isn't it, in IT at the moment? And if you look at this research, which comes from IDC, again, if you thought that the growth of mobile was rapid up until today, it's nothing compared to what's going to happen in the future. And this is really a challenge for businesses in terms of working out how they're going to take advantage of this new technology. But as individuals, it's a challenge too. We've got our skills in terms of analysis or development or testing, and this adds a completely different dimension onto the top of that. So there's some new things that we have to learn, and we have to learn them really quickly. It's not the same old approach that we're using here. There are some different techniques and different tools and different technologies that we need to learn, and so this is a real challenge too. So I think we've heard a lot about mobile over the last couple of years, but I think it's going to continue to be a trend that we'll have to pay attention to. Big data. Now, we've all heard about big data, haven't we? I mean, there's more data out there now than we will ever be able to actually understand, analyze, or use to our advantage. So the analytical skills that we're going to need to be able to identify what data is actually meaningful to us, and then a mechanism for actually retrieving that and using it is really important. Now, I don't know about you, whenever anybody talks about zettabytes or petabytes, my eyes glaze over. It's just too big a number, it's too many noughts for me to get my head around that. But again, as these kind of graphs show, particularly in Europe and North America, the amount of data that's stored and available to us is growing all the time. Now there's a challenge there in terms of being able to make that data work for us and being able to find it and analyze it in a method that's actually useful to us as a business. But there's another side to this as well. There's a misuse of data. I mean, we've all had unsolicited mobile texts, and we've all had emails and junk emails, and that sort of side of things is going to continue. Data can be misused as much as it can be used, so we need to think about making it easily available for us to benefit from, but we also need to pay close attention to how we can avoid it being misused as well, I think. And I actually ran a workshop on this topic yesterday, delivering value and not just working software. Now, anybody who's been in IT for a long time will question whether we've got to the point where we really are delivering working software yet. But that's kind of a given in this statement. And business are looking more and more for evidence that we've not just built software and that we haven't just tested that it works okay, but it's actually delivering the business value that we need. And that's a really difficult challenge because who actually identifies in the first place what the value criteria are, and what's the time lag, the time delay between the time that value is actually identified and the time that we deliver it? How do we recognize it, and how can we be certain that it's been delivered? It's very tempting to continue to develop and develop and test software functionality. But, you know, it's the 80-20 rule. How do we identify the 20% of what we should be doing that's going to deliver 80% of the business value? And certainly an agile approach helps with this, but it's the communications gap, I think, between business and IT that we need to work on here, because when projects are identified and initiatives are identified in the first place, it gets very competitive for sponsors to actually achieve their budgets and get registered, get approval to go ahead with the project. And sometimes they get a little ambitious about what the business benefits are. So although they're keen for us to deliver evidence that we've met their value, it's actually quite hard for the business to be realistic about what their value is. And then we've got the problem of whether it's quantifiable value or qualifiable value. So that's a real challenge too. So we've kind of got 8 different dimensions here that I've gone through that can all overlay on top of one another to kind of make life really, really difficult for all of us who are trying to work within IT and go home at the end of the day and know that we've done a good job. And that's what this is all about, really. But like I said, I wanted you to have your say in this as well. So we're going to launch an online poll shortly. And I'd really, really appreciate it if you could take just a few minutes to register your level of interest in each of these topics. So it won't take long. There's only 8 topics, and you only have to kind of register your level of interest. Now, what I mean by very interested, interested and not interested to me, and let me just qualify that a little bit. If this topic is actually something that you're working within today and trying to find your way through today, it's extremely relevant to you, then that's a very interested topic. If it's something that you can see is likely to be something that's coming up within your organization over the next sort of 3 to 6 months, then mark that as something you're interested in. And obviously, if you're not interested at all, you don't see that on your horizon, then that's just as valid as well. And once we've completed the poll, I'll return to the presentation and explain what I want to do with the information that we're going to gather by way of feedback. Now, I'm hopeful I can give you some immediate feedback, but I've never run a poll before, so we've had a little practice run. So I will try and give you some immediate feedback as to what are the kind of most popular topics. But even if I don't manage to do that, I will email everybody who's attended the webinar and give you the feedback. So you will see some immediate feedback, or very soon feedback from the poll. So if we could go ahead and launch the poll now, your screen will change and you'll go through the different questions, and then it'll come back to me again. You can share them with the audience. That would be brilliant, actually. Yes, because I think it's nice to see immediate feedback, isn't it? Yeah, if you could do that, that would be really good. And really, thanks so much for everybody to participating. That's been excellent.
So I'm showing the first one now. If you want to.
Right, okay. So the first one was understanding the context that you're working within, wasn't it? Making sure you're equipped with that, and that's if everyone can see the results of that, that's sort of half the audience thought that was going to be of interest, and some of you found it very interesting. So that's good. Okay, if you show the results of the next one. Okay, so that's again, that looks like a topic that's very relevant to some of you right now and of interest to over half the audience, so that's good. This is the ever-decreasing shelf life of a requirement. So let's look at the next one. This is the blurring of roles. Wow. Sort of getting on for 60% of you are obviously right in the middle of collaboration and multi-skilled teams. So that's really good. Okay. New methods of working. Yeah, again, obviously of great interest. Nobody said that's not of interest at all. That might be our most popular topic so far, actually. Okay, the next one, please. Okay, this is growth of software as a service. Yeah, it's a little bit behind the curve in terms of something that's coming up of interest rather than immediate interest then. I can understand that. Okay, next one. Mobile apps, right? So it's either you're right in the middle of it now, or you're expecting to be within a kind of medium time frame for most of us. So that's reassuring, actually, because that is a topic that we're putting a lot of effort into. The seventh one. Okay, so that's volumes of data, the big data thing. Again, that's some of you obviously that's not a relevance at all, but it's fairly evenly split, that one, isn't it? Really, although the majority find it of interest or soon to be of interest. And the last one. Demanding value, not just working software. Wow, that's that kind of ties in with the workshop that I was running yesterday. Actually, that seemed to be a topic that the people who attended that workshop were very sort of concerned about, actually, as to how they were going to do that. Well, that's great. Thanks very much. And that's the kind of end of the poll. And I'm really pleased we've been able to share that with you immediately. It's nice to see what your kind of contribution's actually done, isn't it? So why are we actually asking these questions that you've kind of spent your time doing? So, like I said, I appreciate that. Back to the application. Yeah, okay. We've already sent the results, you've seen the results, but we will put them in an email and send them out to you so that you can share them with your colleagues as well. I've actually said in the slides we're recording the webinar. I'm not actually sure whether we are or not, but the slides will certainly be available. So please share this kind of thought process with your colleagues, because what we really want is a kind of wider audience as we can to give us feedback on which topics are of great interest to you. A couple of reasons, really. Partly because we are looking for people who are successfully coping with these kind of changes so that they can share their experiences with other people, and partly we're looking at prioritizing them so that we can feed them into a conference that Gerald Consulting and Unicom are looking to work on in September. So the prioritization that you guys have sort of helped with doing some market research for us will feed directly into that process. And if you think we've missed something, if you think there's a change topic that you're right in the middle of that I have missed, and that you would like to know more about or to contribute to in any way at all, then please don't hesitate to drop me an email. I'm quite happy to receive emails directly, and it's a pretty simple email address, so susan@gerardconsulting.com. And I will take account of any additional feedback that we get from you guys or your colleagues in our thought processes, and hopefully we'll be able to run some interesting events and workshops and things in the future that are really in tune with the challenges that you guys are facing on a day-to-day basis out there.